and the convictions of 39 years imprisonment. The abalone was seized during investigation, amount of 36 million. Will you please indicate what efforts are made to prevent the trafficking of wildlife resources, especially in terms of sea resources? And further indicate the level of cooperation with other state departments like the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries, the SA National Defence Force, and the Department of Environmental Affairs. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Muller. Honorable Mabija.
Thank you, Chairperson. I don't have any question as yet, as all the questions have been asked that I wanted to.
Honorable Molabatsi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. My first question, before I start with my question, I'd like to commend the DPCI to say at least we see there is progress, but maybe to say, can you increase the pace? My first question is, the 4 forensic firms assisting you in analyzing financial flows of 8 cases that are under investigations, where their contracts put on tender. My second one, from time to time we see some Hawks members being fingered in some crime. To what extent do you have the collusion of DPCI members in these high-profile cases? My last one, the bomb threats and explosions in KZN, are they terrorist-related or just some form of hate crime? Thanks, Chair.
Right. Yeah, members of the Transport Committee, they're also very much welcome if there's any questions on this issue. Anybody? Nobody? Yes, sir. If you can just come to the microphone, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, also I wanted to join my colleagues to upload Ndosi about this progress report, but nevertheless, 1 or 2 or 3. Number one, my concern in terms of the serious crimes, if I'm not mistaken, early this year, there was a strong report or allegation about the big banks which were classified or the allegation of involving atrocities. I thought that they were going to be involved in this report. And then also, there was an allegation about the big constructions in terms of the Big Five. If you recall very well in 2010 about the allegation of colluding, I thought that it was going to be included in this. And then in terms of also, which is worrying me, illegal fishing, if you talk about abalones, the report is reporting that there were 84 people which were arrested, only 12 which were sentenced. I can't understand that, why. And then also, if possible, because in other crimes, some people have been mentioned that this were involved. But in this one, I think it's a very, very serious allegation of a strong link with international forces, because these things are being taken international. Like one of the members who was raising the issue of rhino poaching. And this also falls in the same category of poaching, abalone poaching. I think that something must be accelerated, supposed to be accelerated also in that regard. The last one is the issue of locomotives. I'm very much concerned about the issue of locomotives. I think also something must be done to speed up the process of investigation in terms of some of the people with that, what happened exactly, because we are suffering like the challenges we are facing at the moment in terms of the transport. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There's a member from Mr. Millam, you're welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I'm representing COGTA, not Transport. Chairperson, my question relates to VBS, and it's particularly with regard to the number of cases that have been listed here. The presentation showed 5 cases. I personally have laid 2 cases that are not reflected there, one in West Rand and the other in Sandton, with regard to municipal managers and with regard to directors of VBS, and I see that those are not reflected. I know of a further 10 cases that are also not reflected there that were lodged on the same date as those ones that were shown. So I'd like to know what's happened to those missing cases and why they are not part of this investigation. Thank you.
We'll allow another round later, but I think the important thing, General, is maybe also to make a distinction for the members who may be necessarily not part of our committee. What you focus on as DPCI, the level 3 to 5, and what the detectives are running, those dockets. But I think it will be also assist. But let's go to the responses. Minister, you're also welcome. If there's anything you want to address, you're welcome.
No, thanks for addressing the first one that we were directed where to answer. Those that are outside that scope could not be answered. That's one. 2, Mamupula is not here because I wanted to answer the question that jointly she asked with Ubabum Mhlongo of Ututuzan and not handcuffed, but we call leg what? Shackles. Yes. So unfortunately, she's not here. But I'll answer the question nonetheless. That caused some problem. But the biggest problem it was for the police. It caused a lot of problem for the police. The decision was questioned by the police. Why did it happen? It was done by justice, not by the police. Actually, the police, the Hawks, urged the court not to chain Tutuzan. The court said it was their norm in that particular commercial court to chain everybody who comes in. The question that Babu Mhlongo raised was raised by the police to say the man handed himself over, came on his own will, so you can't chain him. And then that had to be discussed big time between the Minister of Justice and the Minister of Police. The Minister of Justice has taken an issue with his court to says, firstly, the structure, I haven't seen it, the structure itself is not very fit to be a court. So is working on the structure itself, but on the generic approach of the court to say everybody who comes here will be chained. So that should be clarified, that even the South African police did not see the reason. But that time was not going to the police station, was going to court. And the court was saying, we're not taking matter of his if he's not following the tradition of the particular court. So there where the matter is. So it's more of the justice question rather than the police. So though everybody thought and knew it was the police matter, it wasn't the police matter. It was the justice. I'm told that even the NPA begged that there should be no chaining of the men that have surrendered himself, would not be regarded as dangerous as some of the guys. I agree that would have been taken to court and chained when it is known that he is dangerous. Did we chain people? Was chained. Yeah. So there are dangerous people. I was asking one top criminal called Bibi if he was chained. I'm told he was chained. The guy is linked to 23 cash heists in the country. So such person, then you'll expect that person to be changed. So that's the answer on this particular matter. So because it have a little bit of politics, one had to try to answer it. The other one is a corruption that by my friend the General Groenewald. I'm sure people they saw the announcement yesterday by the Minister of Justice. From the office of the attorney, state attorney. I'm sure there was that announcement yesterday.
where that office runs collusions of 80 billion plus minus. So now the question was asked, is there anybody who should have looked after this? Now the question you ask, if it is the office of the state attorney, who else could have done it? Thanks from the president that he has assigned the investigation from 2013 to 2018 to look at that highly collaborated crime between legal firms, top legal people, South African police themselves, lawyers who are running this scam of milking the government, at the tune of 80 million. Big chunk of the money comes from health, where one case will be put on 3 courts. Let's say the case will be genuine for demand that is made by that person that was wronged or erred. But the same case will be put in 3 courts. And then with, for instance, there are 2 health cases, 2 of them, only 2, they were at the cost of 100 million. 2. So we'll be in 3 courts put by these lawyers. There are 2, especially one lawyer in Eastern Cape that about 11 billion is attached to him alone. So working with our own officials will be police, but big time here is State Attorney's Office, where ourselves as the South African police who have been victims, where they settle things with criminal minus us knowing. As the South African police, they bypass us to settle, and with us they have settled 34 million with this criminal who is still in court. His partner is in prison because he was found to be guilty, and we are more likely this guy will be found guilty but has been given the settlement of 34 million. We didn't know as the South African police, as we were seated there, people they came for our cars, to confiscate our cars, furnish and everything, because we are owing somebody 34 million that we didn't know. So the question you are asking, Honorable Mr. Groenewald, where the corrupt is in the chain, sir. Is in the chain, starting from where the chain begins, where the chain ends. You go to the most known prison or correctional service at the Sun City, at 16 criminals, among them 7 murderers. They jump. And there is a kumbi outside waiting for them, well organized thing. The police are told at 12 in the afternoon, when people ran at 3 more. So you give them the space to run and all that kind of thing. So it's a whole chain where we'll have to go back and say we have this chain where everybody has a problem in the system. So I wanted to answer that question of the last one. I'll work on this one. Zamas. Yes, Honorable Member, this ministry has met with the Ministry of Mining, the Honorable Minister Pete. There is one thing that I'm sure you have heard that was announced, issuing of licenses to Zamas or some community members that are running this illegal. They're no more illegal because now they have licenses, so they are legal. But it has happened in one place, that will be your Northern Cape, around Kimberley and all that. So which really is the work of police chasing those people because now they are legal. So, but there are more that are still illegal and more dangerous. When I was a national commissioner, I went underground, stayed there for some hours trying to track these guys. They go there with AK-47s. They're not just running on the abandoned mines. Sometimes they displaced the new mines that has been just identified. They come there, they depress everybody, and they take over on those things. But the problem, major problem, those guys are not rich that go that go underground. So who gets rich then? That's the answer we must find. Who gets rich? Because even those that they've been given these licenses, they don't seem to be getting rich. Seems to be those people that they live on this illicit kind of business, they still continue, or themselves they bypass the legal ways of doing this thing. So it's a question of us as the police, the question of mining houses themselves, the question of the department, but the question of Interpol, and is the question of the courts taking this illicit mining, taking this poaching serious. For instance, if you look there on the screen, as it JJ, as you see there, total cases finalized 12, but only 39 years have been given to those people that have been sentenced, which means those sentences are too light, which means courts are not taking serious some of these matters, poaching, your illegal mining and all. Until there, you can't have 12 people sentenced for serious thing, 36 million value crime, and they're given 39 years, 12 of them. So it's an issue that all of us will have to come on board, and the question of the government across the board working together on this matter. We have been requested by the Minister of Mines to create a special unit of dealing with Zamazamas. Well, we are discussing with him on those matters, looking at the resources, because he comes from the very rich industry, if there can be contributions and all that. We are not opposed to that idea, but we are looking at the logistic of doing this thing, dealing with that matter. Last point on the civil servants not attending to their duties, Honorable Member again. We have called 2 meetings as the police of discussing these explosives that they are using to bomb money cars. Quite several of them, they come from these mines, even at the top level of managers selling these explosives to criminals and syndicates. But also, big chunk of them, they come from Zim, these explosives. They cross the border. We have arrested quite several of them coming from Zim, detonators, explosives, everything. So we have spoken to the Minister of Mines to say your people are not cooperating, whereas the sender and the source of these explosives, they come from mines. So he has spoken to his people. We believe that come next meeting, they'll be part of us dealing with the matters. I'm sure the rest of the questions, there is a very capable team around me to answer those questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. General Libya, we can continue.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members. The first question dealing with the restructuring process and our preparedness to be dealing with accounting matters, how effective, how are we strengthening the DPCI to be capable of dealing with this? We are working on various ways of strengthening the DPCI. Part of this include those other members that are in other environments, not specifically in the DPCIs, especially the commercial crime environment. We are getting working on getting those back. Some of the members may have seen the advert in the 2 weeks ago in the newspaper, where among them we are looking for this auditing environment. There was a process in the past where various posts were advertised for auditors. But this you are not capable of attracting because of the environment where they come from, to come into the organization and come and focus only on police matters. I think that the environment where they are operating from seems to be highly remunerative as compared to working for a particular department, which is why you will find that when we need only specialist auditing, we still utilize those services. So that is how we try in the restructuring process to enhance the capacity and the ability to be effective in dealing with this possibly complicated investigation. The second question of how proactive are we dealing with these matters that from time to time they will be highlighted in public space. Whenever there are these things that are raised, even before the case is reported to us, we either pick it up on the media or in the newspaper or any other forum. We follow on that one to see, is this matter that is being discussed something that has been brought to our attention? When we find that it is not reported and a crime appears to have been committed, we follow that, which is a proactive way of not waiting until somebody come and report. Some of these reports, with one case you shall have noted when I said that there was a report that came in terms of Section 34 of the Prevention of Corrupt Activities Act. Some of the people, instead of reporting, they wait until they are approached. So that is the reality, that somebody who's involved in corruption at times is not always easy to report. We follow that, and which is the reactive way of dealing with commercial related cases. From time to time, when there is a media statement, either the conviction or the arrest, there will always be an indication of how the people should be looking forward to try to prevent this thing. Like when there are new devices involved in corruption, we will be involved with the various role players, be it the bank or other institution, to communicate the modus operandi, which is a way of trying to prevent some of the people from falling into these scams. The minister have dealt with the issue of the handcuffing of a particular suspect, so I will not repeat what he have answered on. There was a question of extradition of certain people to come to the country. Maybe what I need to say in general is that there will be no holy cow in the investigation. There are certain methods that are being followed in securing the attendance of accused persons in court. Some may not have known, may have read about some people being out, but when they came in the country, we immediately knew, and then we secured their attendance in court. We will not be communicating these methods of operation. But what we can generally say is that when you deal with extradition, you need to work to the letter of that extradition, so that once you have asked what is appearing on the charge sheet is what you shall focus on, and forget about any other thing that is not in that particular charge sheet. So there are various approaches so that we approach some of these matters carefully. I'm not going to be dealing with any specific case, but I'm just talking in general how the extradition processes works. So there is work around that, but there are nitty-gritties that obviously because of the current live cases, one wouldn't like to be deliberating on those in public space.
General, sorry to interrupt you. Honourable members, we're going to take a 10-minute break now, and then we'll come back for the General for the other responses. 10 minutes. Thank you.
to the DPCI involvement, which is part of the question. If any of our own is involved, we embark on investigation. Part of the investigation will be investigated by the IPAD, which is their mandate. But where we come to know about the involvement, we continue with the investigation. We don't spare anyone who's corrupt anywhere in the system. If that comes to our attention, we deal with that one. The question of whether there is the involvement of Al-Qaeda on this hoax bombs, we wouldn't like to engage on that one. That is a sensitive part of the investigation. We would like to just indicate that we are investigating, we are using various resources at our disposal, so we wouldn't like to hint on that one. With regard to the no identified suspects in the Transnet matter, the issues is that you have got various witnesses who seems to be pointing fingers in different directions. So we wouldn't like to be saying that we can specifically say that no, the other fingers are pointing in the wrong direction. These are the ones that are the suspects. So we are dealing with a variety of companies, a variety of individuals whose names are featuring on this. So we haven't reached a stage where we can begin to eliminate others as not the suspects. So that's why we haven't mentioned the number. The question of the names of the suspect was repeated, but I have already answered on that one. Why we are not naming the suspects, as we only name the accused. The question of how many found guilty and not guilty has been highlighted by the minister and the reasoning thereof. On the question of cooperation, also touching on the destruction of the columns and the like and the environment where these illegal minings are taking place, I think that the minister have also hinted on that one. In the engagement where we are chairing, the institutions that are participating are not only the government entities, there are also private entities that contribute, but it has been addressed by the minister. It is at that higher level. The minister have answered on the criminal justice system, the value chain of the involvement in corruption, which was repeated. The clarity on the illegal mining, which seems to have been incorrectly typed on the slide. Indeed, we're talking about illegal miners, not illegal mining, which appears to have been repeated twice. So that problem of illegal mining is indeed caused by illegal miners. These illegal miners include both South African and miners from elsewhere that may be considered to be illegal immigrants. The question of whether dealing with illegal immigrants or immigrants is the mandate of the DPCI. The DPCI focuses on what is called human trafficking, which is part of immigration, but human trafficking is a more serious portion that the DPCI is dealing with. So it is part of immigration, but trafficking is where individuals are not necessarily volunteering to be part of the movement. So we are dealing with illegal trafficking of human beings. The question of the postponement of the case to 2019, why not the matter finalized now? That is the area that we have not elaborated much, because there are things that are not ready for public consumption. There is a certain methodology of investigation, so the court shall have taken various aspects into account in postponing the matter to that particular date. The minister have answered on the question of the issue of handcuffing, which I think he have indicated the position of the police regarding that aspect. The number of financial investigators are, do we have enough financial investigators? As I have indicated with regard to the restructuring, the attempt that we are doing to capacitate ourselves, at this stage we can't say that we have got enough financial investigation, which is why you, from time to time, you will be engaging the services of auditing firms which are trained in that environment. So we are not having enough financial investigators. There was a question of involvement of forensic audit firms, which was repeated with regard to other companies that have been named. All these companies that have been appointed, the first has been appointed by the South African Reserve Bank. It is one of the prerequisites of initiating these investigations. Certain investigation, especially when there is a Treasury Regulations Directive, one of the prerequisites is that the Reserve Bank is expected to appoint certain entities to do certain preliminary work. So part of that is where they have appointed forensic audit firms. With regard to those other firms that have been mentioned, they have not been appointed by the SAPS. They have been appointed by the Treasury in line with the methodology that they use in appointing auditing firms. The firms that are being appointed by the SAPS, we have got a methodology of selecting those. So there is a particular method that our supply chain embark on to select among the service providers that are listed. So there is a method that we do. We don't even do directly as DPCR. We request that particular appointment, and then once appointment, we work with that. So what the DPCI compile a mandate of what will be expected of the auditing firm, and then the auditing firm provide their intention, availability, and that is how they are appointed. The issue of arrest 84 and the sentences, the minister have explained that particular number and the nature of the sentences, the combined sentence that is reflected on the presentation. When we do these cases, we don't do them alone. Indeed, we involve other departments, the Department of Agriculture, DAF, Forestry, and the Environmental Affairs. So when you conduct this type of investigation, depending on the commodity as to which other department play a role, we engage those. And I think that the DFA will obviously play a role, that even when we seize the exhibits, we don't keep this with us like other exhibits that we keep in police custody. There is the arrangements with these other departments that have got the necessary facility to keep those. So that is how we collaborate with those other departments. I have answered the question of forensic firms when I was dealing with the audit just previously. I have indicated that when the DPCI is fingered in some of the cases that from time to time are highlighted and the extent thereof. The question of whether these threats are terrorist related or mere hate crime is something that one will obviously find the reason for that only at the conclusion of the case. You don't always know why people will do certain things. When you do the investigation, you investigate broadly any possibility that might be behind certain behaviors. You just have to investigate and uncover that. The issue of the question on the big banks and big constructions, the minister have indicated that in preparing this presentation we were guided by what was requested. We did not deal generally with other banks or other institutions. I have answered the question of 12 sentences that the minister have highlighted. The issue of the other 5 cases reported in the West Rand and Sandton that are not reflected in the VBS bank, we have engaged the colleague here to find out which are those cases. They have indicated that they were reported at station level around June. So this shall have been reflected as fraud cases. We will go to those cases and they will form part of the bigger VBS investigation. So I think those were the questions that were raised, unless I have missed one of those.
Thank you very much, General Labia. We'll allow a very short last round on DPCI before we go to the transport issues. Yes, Honourable Groenewald, then Honourable Marke will come here on that side.
Sorry, Chairperson, just for clarity, I didn't get it on my question on the Transnet issue. Where it was not identified. It's not even persons not even identified. So I just want clarity on that. And on the opportunity, my last question is on the witness protection program. Chairperson, really we have a problem. We know that you can only fight, well, not only, but a major contribution to fight corruption is actually if you have a whistleblower in a specific department. But it's a huge problem when it comes to the protection of those whistleblowers. Now, I would like to ask the General, what do they do to ensure the protection of the whistleblowers? Because people don't want to come forward because they say, in the end, they're the ones who pay the price. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Marke.
Thank you, Chairperson. My question would be around the attack on police officers and police stations. And then it brought me to, we had two debates in Parliament on the same issue. Now it makes me think that we've been talking about body cameras. And I was thinking that if that police officer, the lady police officer who was alone in the police station, and maybe there are no CCTV cameras in the police station. We've been talking about body cameras. How far are we? Because that would make life very easy. In Hermanas, if a person was attacked, then it means the culprit would immediately be identified. How far are we with that, if I was to call it a project? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Molabatsi.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My other part of my question was not answered. The one of the forensic firms. The other part was were their contracts put on tender. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, Honorable Mula.
Thank you, Chairperson. Can you please correct me if I'm wrong in slide 31? A 36-year-old man who previously resided at Verulam was arrested and charged under Section 33 of the Protection of Constitutional Democracy Against Terrorists and Other Related Activities. Is it Section 33 or 3? Can you please correct me? Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable Mabicha, are you covered? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just a follow-up question. Chairperson, I would be very much grateful, like as I've asked the question in terms of the locomotives, that, what are the developments so far? Because we are having, in terms of transport, we're having a lot of challenges in terms of those saga. And then also, last comment, you see, if we are dealing with this issue of the state capture, I think there are things which we ought to be careful about, like, I'm a little bit concerned about your response, because when I was asking the damage, what damage can be caused by the big banks, if you talk about the banks, because so far, nobody so far came in front to indicate that how much was embezzled. It was touched and left aside, isolated. And then also with the issue of the Big Five, it was also touched and it was sidelined, and nobody is taking us on board whether there are investigations or the case closed of both of them, with the big banks and the Big Five, because they form part, we feel as a society, that there are no people who are above the law. Everybody is subjected to the law, and we appreciate the speed, and also, as I indicated earlier on, that it will be very much grateful if those things can be taken together. There are no big players which must be left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bailey.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just two questions from my side. One is a fresh one that hadn't occurred to me during the last round, and then one is just a follow-up from an input previously. Just to ask, how many, at least with the background that the National DPCI head had indicated there are 10 detectives investigating the VBS case, can I just ask how many investigators are there on the Transnet case? And the reason I ask that is because the initial reports on this matter, I think it was a Mail and Guardian story if I'm not mistaken, had indicated that there was initially only one investigator, and so there were questions as to whether or not the DPCI was serious about delving into the matter effectively. So what personnel capacity are we standing at with the team focused on the Transnet case? If you have that with you, please. And then my second question is on this matter of the that was raised by the minister, that the 39 years imprisonment. The first was just to get clear, if I understand those figures correctly. So is that saying out of the 12 convictions or the 12 cases finalized, the sum total of the sentences is 39 years? Okay, so that's the answer. So then, in terms of the why, is that a problem with the way in which the charges are initially formulated at station level? So, for example, the officer at the CSC is not aware of a specific kind of serious charge that they must include in the dockets, which would, if successfully prosecuted, achieve a higher penalty? Or are there weaknesses in current statutes whereby we don't actually have the statutory instruments to bring to bear heavier penalties for these kind of organized crimes relating to abalone poaching and so on? Because if it's a legislative shortcoming, then it's something that Parliament must exercise its mind on and address that, because that's the forum to do so. But if it's a problem with the inadequate use of available statutes at station level, then it's a training issue, and maybe we can look at how the stations that are in abalone poaching and other sea resource organized crime precincts, there must be targeted training for those officers so that they're better informed about how they formulate those charge sheets in order to maximize the chances of a heavy penalty or sanction through the courts. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Kalabana.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've seen the SAPS/DPCI also act on certain procurement fraud within the SAPS, and it does seem that is the area where the most corruption takes place in any ministry, is in terms of procurement. Has there been any action either within the SAPS additionally, or any other ministry in this regard? Have you pinpointed procurement fraud only in the SAPS? In talking obviously about the Paklane shares, the whole matter, they've all been in court, a bunch of them, or are there additional matters within the SAPS under investigation? And also, what about the other ministries? Are they having the same issues that we've seen experienced in SAPS?
Thank you, Honourable Shongo.
No, thanks, Chairperson. No, Chairperson, what I wanted to find out, I didn't get explicit, clear answer on this question of extradition, particularly of the Guptas. India is part of BRICS, as far as I understand, and certainly there must be some protocol agreement at a BRICS level. But apart from that, we are part of Interpol. And my understanding with regard to the Guptas in particular is that warrants of arrest were issued, not unless if I'm wrong, Chairperson. But my understanding was that warrants of arrest were issued, which means it's a solid presentation charge with a solid presentation charge sheet to say what we are issuing warrants. Then now, if extradition cannot help us at that particular level, when warrants of arrest have been issued, now what more can be done in order to get this? Because we definitely need these people here. These people have looted the state here. We must get them here for them to answer and pay back our money. We need this money back so that it can actually help our poor people in this country. They have looted this country. We cannot lie down like that. They must come back in whatever way.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Maybe just the last question from my side. It's in dealing with corruption within the criminal justice system. It's also a question we asked for General Matakata when she was acting head. General Bia, the number or percentage of members of the DPCI that's currently vetted. What is the percentage currently? Is it 70, 60, 40? Because it's quite important. DPCI is our premier crime fighting buster in terms of commercial crime and also other serious crime. So what is that percentage? And maybe also then, of course, the integrity testing is ongoing, but what other measures are you putting in place to ensure that your members are above board? Thank you. That's the questions in terms of this presentation. General Bia.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'll start with this question of the collusion of the banks and the big construction companies. As I have indicated that the presentation was informed by what was requested, but I need to confirm that there is indeed a case that is under investigation with regard to construction companies. It is done by our serious economic offenses. There are also other two cases that deals with the banks. One such case is registered in Sandringham, and the other one is registered in Durban Central. So there are these cases that are under investigation, but they are not part of this presentation. There is a question of the section in the law that we have quoted. I think we add in reflecting as it is. It's supposed to read section 13 in bracket subsection 1 in bracket subsection A. So that is the correct section of the Act. The question of whether there were contracts, there were tenders on the contracts that were awarded to these audit firms. As I indicated, these audit firms were not appointed by the SAPS, so they were appointed by the South African South African Reserve Bank, and the others were appointed by the National Treasury. So they have got their own processes that we were not forming part of. So when we do ourselves, we put it in terms of the tender process that we utilize. I think that this question of the attack on police officers and the stations, I think this one can better be answered when our visible policing come next week, so that I do not answer from any investigative point of view. The questions that was not clear when I answered with regard to Transnet, I have indicated that there are various companies that are being pointed out and various individuals. It depends who you are talking to, but due to the fact that they point out in different directions, we have not reached a stage of elimination where we can eliminate that these ones that are being suspected are not necessarily part of the suspect. That is why we haven't listed like others. So we haven't reached that stage of saying with certainty that this one are eliminated, this one are the suspect that we are looking at. So there are names and companies, but we haven't reached a stage where we can say with certainty that this one are eliminated.
Sorry, Chair.
Just a moment, General. Honourable Groenewald.
Now, can I ask on this one, Chairperson? Because, I mean, if you look at the analysis, I mean, people in positions who actually authorize certain things. Can I just ask that there should be stronger focus on this matter? Because as I said, we're talking about 38 billion. I mean, if you look at newspapers, then they identify, in fact, certain people, which everybody see as suspects. And now we must hear, but there are no suspects yet. So I understand the matter that if you have an accused in the end, that you have a sure case. But I'm not completely satisfied with the answer, but okay, can we ask that they just focus on the Transnet issue, please?
Thank you, Alderman Grobot. General, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. We shall do so. The question of the witness protection program, I think that the law requires of us to make recommendation when there are witnesses that should be testifying in certain cases. And the Department of Justice will obviously make a decision after assessing the applications that we have. So the strength of the law itself, I think that the minister have already assigned us to be looking at that, because it seems that it still leaves room for improvement. But as I indicated, the law is there which provide for the protection, but the sufficiency of that law is something that we need to be looking at. With regard to the number of investigators that are dealing with the Transnet matter, there are those who are involved in the investigation, excluding those who are doing the analysis and other supportive role. There are 3, those who are doing the physical investigation. The question of the suspect that have been sentenced to 39 years combined, whether it is the law or whether it is the charges that were brought against them. Firstly, I think it is the way in which the Act is crafted. Seemingly, the Act has not put harsher sentences regarding this type of crimes. Where the law bring in harsher sentences is when, if you can prove that these are not only minors or a lower level, but they are involved in a organized part of this. So if you can prove that they are operating on a higher level, not just as ordinary individuals violating maybe the Mining Rights Act and the like, if you can prove that in addition to that they commit more than that, but they operate as a organized criminal group, then that is when the harsher sentences come in terms of the poker. So the poker which embrace this other minor legislation, when combined, a harsher sentence come. So these ones that are getting these sentences, it means that they are on a lower level. You haven't reached a higher level. The question on procurement in the SAPS and other departments, hinting that we are aware of other investigation that is taking place. Part of this investigation that you have hinted on is actually expanding to deal with other aspects that were not identified at the beginning. So whenever there are these things that are identified, they are referred for investigation. So in the SAPS, part of that matter that you have highlighted of procurement is involving more than maybe the individual that you have hinted. So this investigation is dealt with by the team. It's not with the SAPS, but we are assisting, contributing with regard to investigators in other specialized environments. So we are assisting on that one. The rest of the departments, I think these are generally these cases of corruption that comes. They come from different environments. As we have indicated that the majority of the corruptions that we are dealing with emanate from government departments. So they form part of this. It will depend on the level that you are dealing with these cases. You will come with those come as a clean audit, which are focusing on the municipalities. And then you have got those that come as the anti-corruption task team, which comes at various government departments. So there are cases that we deal with other than the one that has been referred to that occurred in the SAPS in the procurement environment. With regard to the extradition matter, I was trying to explain the operation of this law, the complications of when you apply this and what happens when the person that you have applied, you have asked for, arrive in the country, and what is that which you can do, and what is that which you shall have tied your hands on. With regard to the Interpol part of this, we are working closely with Interpol. That is on a police-to-police arrangement. It is not part of the extradition treaty. The extradition is a slightly separate law, but on a police-to-police, we are working closely with that, which is why our counterpart will invite us to come in their country. But you still need the mutual legal assistance when you move one person from one country to the other. So I can't explain deeper on this one because it is a live case that we are dealing with. The last question of the vetting, I do not have the specific figures here. I did not bring my officer that deal with those figures, but we monitor that constantly. On top management, we had already passed the 95%, and then the obligation that we have put, which we set a date that by this date everybody must have applied, and then it will just be a matter of finalizing the application. So more than 95% have already applied. So we are in the process of receiving the outcome, whether they are being granted or not granted. So the idea is that we would like to ensure that all the members in the DPCI are beyond reproach. Thank you, Chairperson.
The last word to the Minister, then we'll go to the next section.
Chairperson will remember that, put it clear, the thing of extradition and all falls under justice. You remember that sometimes it caused some tensions between the police and those that would be responsible in that particular time. We hope it will be resolved, and we'll stick on our side, which is more of Interpol. The police attack, including yesterday, Honorable Member, I hope we'll be assisted, especially by our portfolio. Police are giving battles and wars that are not theirs. Police, they spend so much resources that should be properly utilized on the areas that are not theirs. people here put the fires and they ask, where are the police? Person will steal the money off the potholes and all that, knowing very well that the man was given and shout the money. And when the people come and say, these roads, we can't drive on them, they begin, in one township, they came and planted trees in the potholes in the street. Yeah, they planted trees. And the money has been given. And when people rise, the first question is, where are the police? Maybe that is linked with the question asked by an honorable member caller of, do we look police or look across? We need to look across, honorable member. You know, the Northwest, because I'm the member of the IMC in Northwest, you go to computer, you find Cele occupying Ngolezane Street, number 111. You find Matarata occupying 112. You go to get those 5,000 of those houses. There are only slabs. 5,000 of those. They are occupied. Their own computer. They are occupied. So and so lives there. 5,000 are only slabs, and all the money is gone to that project. So that's Northwest. I don't believe it's a Northwest alone. I think other areas. So I don't want to sit here and make this area a best area. But one thing, the question you are raising, I don't know if it did put the figures, but I can on their behalf put the figures that 103 down short on the experience level of general, colonels, brigadiers, people that left the 100 people that are best placed, get out of your organization. That weakens the organization. We're also facing an issue of fixing the flying Boeing here. While the Boeing is flying, we need to be fixing it going forward. In both Hawks and special crime intelligence, everybody knows the reason on crime intelligence that will happen, that for 5 or 6 years, what happened to that environment. So they need to be fixing that, but we're not going to come and tell you that, give us 2 years, we're fixing these things, will tell us to go home. So it's a combination of both. So across the government, this thing of the attack of the police, because even yesterday, very rare that the communities come to clash with police. Very rare. I went to Hernemas. What you call the place? Anonymous. It was clear a problem between councillors, municipality and communities. But who suffers? Are police. Who gets attacked? Are police. We still have my member who is sleeping in hospital, who was shot with all over. They took the guns and all that kind of thing. Fortunately, we have found all our guns back and all that. So, Northwest again, in 5 days, when we're dealing with the matters, we spend 22 million in 5 days. Because, yes, you send everybody there, you got the SNT, you get the overtime, more petrol, the accommodation and everything. So just imagine what we would have done with 22 million fighting with crime. But we spend so much money on the things that are not our mandate. So if the call is made for other departments, really, especially Cocta, the Cocta man is gone here, especially Cocta, because most of those uprising, they come from Cocta, sometimes they come from Fees Must Fall, which is a little bit stabilized now. But you go to Kanyamazan, as we speak, it's not police who destroy those houses, but who's at the forefront, who's taking all the blame there, are the police. So it's a question of police finding it and creating unnecessary hatred between the communities, and for that reason, the real crime flies below the radar. The real crime flies because we are on these high profile, high tensions with the communities. And if there is a problem between communities and the police, it will be very difficult to resolve the crime because we need to improve those relationships between police to fight crime. So is one issue that one wants to raise on this one. But that does not answer the question of race. What do we do with technology? We still have to do that. I'm sure that this poll will answer that. The last one on this one, it's but the honorable member is gone. We were responding on a guided way that were questions were asked. There are other high-profile serious cases that we would have. Cash heist, I see you're not asking questions, which means there's something good we are doing. That people don't ask questions about cash heist at the present moment, which come June. Was it May, June? We were really bad. These guys were messing us up. There are almost 52 of them that are in our hands now. From number 1, 2, 3, 4 in the top 20. The Honorable Mzuvukile Wellington B.P. Nadane, who is linked on 23 of these cash heists. But another problem about the same PP was on bail. He's doing all these things. I don't want to blame other people. He's doing all these things. He's on bail for 2 years. Yeah, for the same thing. So that, and people would not know there that police have done their work and the people was let go. How he got the bail when he was arrested for the cash out, and not just the cash out, and the shootout. There was a shootout when he was arrested and got bail in 2016. So we need to rerun after him and all that kind of stuff. But we think we're there. There is quite a foreign element on cash heist, especially the blasters seems to be coming from Botswana. There is one young man who's crying, remember, missing his mom every day. We have told him that we'll see his mom when he can't separate between the mom and the grandmother. So because he's going to be with us for some time. The element of Zimbabweans that are there. There is element of our own guys, our own police, police there that are there. I don't know if I can say that. I think we arrested some police yesterday. Yeah. How many? Well, yeah, we arrested in the last 24 hours. We have arrested 5 police officers. So we will work on these things wherever we find it. I always say when I speak to police, one painful thing is announce the arrest of the police officer. It's really painful, but it needs to be done if it needs to. If it needs to happen. As I'm saying, the chain, the letter, the book that all of you have read of the heist, it tells you that these guys, they buy everybody. One guy was posting to say, we don't have fiscal, we don't have auditor general, we don't budget, we just do things. So government is busy budgeting, constrained and all that. So that's why they argue that they beat us. Because they say they buy from the police to the correctional officers. Not proven, Chair. They say they buy prosecutors, they buy magistrates, they buy judges. Is a question of crime running parallel governance. And those are the things that we need to fight, and those are the things that we're putting to reverse. But up to this point, since, I must say, since the fixing of crime intelligence, the the hawks and other elements. I think we'll be getting there on this. It goes up, comes down. When guys get released from prison, they go back, and they never get out of the system. They go back, and they start afresh. They reproduce the other guys, the new guys, and all. It will be them and us all the time. But if we can just work on the corruption area, because it's big element that ourselves will get consumed and absorbed in the whole system of criminality. We will get there. But for now, looks like that is a battle that we are dealing with. The last one, I'm not going to expand. The new big phenomenon, Chairperson, the kidnappings. There's a new big phenomenon, kidnappings, which is giving us problem. The information is that as you are released, we are forced to give 5 more names, which means it's a growing industry. We are forced to give 5 more names that will be kidnapped. So one person released, know that there is 5 online, but we are working on that. For last 2 weeks, twice we have been in Mozambique, working with the officials there, the minister and all that. We're trying, because the phenomenon seems to be coming from the north down south. So we're trying to work with those people that have encountered the matters. We're not sitting back, but it's a big phenomenon, especially with those people that have money. Is one thing that seems to be giving us some problem going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Minister, thank you to the DPCI. We're going now to the next topic. If Mr. Philip Taibosh and his team can join us for the presentation. After that, it will be Kusatu and then the detectives. Can somebody from staff just specifically to help Barbara, please? The issue of taxi and also rail-related crime matters. Now, honourable members, of course, most South Africans use public transport, and wherever we are in terms of our constituency offices and complaints, it's very much related to issues that is appearing at those sectors. The Minister of Police also, I think earlier this year, intervened in the Eastern Cape, and he can maybe also share his experiences with the committee and his recommendations. But we thought it was important to have an interaction with some of the role players and also the Portfolio Committee on Transport. So I'll also give now an opportunity to the Chair of Transport. You're very much welcome if you want to say any... you're happy at this stage? Okay, great. So let's go to Mr. Taibosh and his team to start with the presentation. Thank you, sir.
And members of the committee, the Minister and his team. Chairperson, looking into the history of South Africa since '94 and particularly after 2001 with the formation of SANTACO, which is the South African National Taxi Council, I must indicate that it was for the first time that we as a taxi industry felt recognized as human beings in South Africa. And I want to therefore congratulate the newly appointed Commissioner of Police, Kehla Stole, for coming out after so many years to recognize that taxi people are also human beings. It's when we heard for the first time that whoever was involved in the shooting on the 21st of July in KwaZulu-Natal in Colenso, that those people involved will be hunted by the police. There has never been such an agency from the South African government, including the police, on the taxi-related matters as far as we are concerned as the taxi industry. But nevertheless, we are here to respond to the invitation which was extended by the Portfolio Committee to us last week. And I must indicate it was in a short notice, but we want to pay our due to that invitation. Chairperson, we are going to give a brief history of SANTACO, and we are also going to deal with the purpose of SANTACO's briefing today here in the Portfolio Committee. We are also going to highlight on the operating licenses. Why are they so important for us? We are also going to highlight on the legislation and the issuance of the operating licenses. And we are also going to deal with the role of law enforcement agencies in the country, and in particularly dealing with the taxi industry. We are also going to deal with this issue which has made the taxi industry villains in the country when it comes to the meter taxi violence. We are also going to deal with the taxi investigative task team, which are mostly in Gauteng. And I think that we will take this vehicle forward. And again, I want to appreciate the invitation. Chairperson, during 1995, and I've brought the copy of the National Taxi Task Team, which formulated an engagement between the government of South Africa and the taxi industry via the then minister, the first minister of transport in this country, Mac Maharaj. The task team was formulated with a purpose of finding a solution to huge problems which emanated before 1994 in this country, which led to numerous taxi violences, which led to many killings at that time. Let me indicate that we appreciated the intervention of the then first president, democratic president of South Africa, may his soul rest in peace, for his intervention around that time, 1996, which led to the formation of SANTACO as the mouthpiece or the governing body of the taxi industry. And we must indicate with appreciation that since the formation of SANTACO, under the pillars which were given as a mandate to SANTACO, and these pillars were the following. firstly, number one was to unite the taxi industry. The second one was to eliminate violence within the taxi industry. The third one was to economically emancipate the taxi industry. When it comes to unity within the taxi industry, we believe that since 2001 up to today, we have been able to bring a significant number of unity within the taxi industry. Hence, we want to indicate that we have never seen a complete 100% unity in any society, but the striving to unify the taxi industry beyond 90%, I think we have achieved that. So when it comes to the issue of violence, Chairperson, I must bring to the fore that since around 2003 up to 2014, we worked very hard as a taxi industry in ensuring that we brought the number of violence within the industry down. But unfortunately, we saw again the sliding up of violence around towards the end of 2014 to today. That's what we are seeing in the country, but we are going to highlight a few issues. Let me go to the slides. Santaco was democratically elected by an all-inclusive representative vote taken by taxi industry leaders from all 9 provinces in the interest of peace, unity, democracy, formalization, and economic empowerment. At the first historic elections in Durban held on September, the date was the 16th of September. Santaco remain today as the only national representative structure mandated by the taxi industry, responsible for acting in the best interest of its taxi operators, members through interaction with government, parastatals, and private sector on matters affecting taxi operators and related to their broader operations. When looking at the taxi-related crime, one has to be very cautious. That's the next slide. One has to be very cautious. One has to be very cautious, and one has to ask yourself the following questions. Is the snatching of a handbag at a taxi rank a taxi-related crime or an opportunistic crime? Officially, South African Police Service do not keep statistics of crimes according to categories, but have a quote, 17 related and close quote, crimes scope, and it is therefore impossible to differentiate one incident of violence from another. In our mind, we should deal with the violence that is currently taking place in the taxi industry and who are the perpetrators thereof, what role are enforcement agencies playing, and what can be done to stop such incidents. Chairperson, maybe the question may be a little bit disturb or may even come to say, what is this to do with the violence in the taxi industry? Why are operating license the main source of violence in the minibus and meter taxi industry? An operating license is described in the National Land Transport Act 5 of 2009 as a license required by Section 50 and granted and issued in accordance with this Act or the Transition Act. An operating license must only be issued on application by either the National Public Transport Regulator, a provincial regulatory entity, or municipality to which the operating license function has been assigned to. That's Section 51 of the National Land Transport Act. Where the application of an operating license concerns services provided for in an integrated transport plan, the provisions of that plan were appropriate and where possible will dictate the decision of the entity that is to decide on the approval of the application of Section 50, Section 50/3 of the NLTA. In terms of Section 59 of the NLTA, the regulatory entities must, in prescribed manner, give notice that an application for an operating license has been received, given the prescribed particulars, as well as give interested persons the opportunity to comment and make representations within the prescribed period. All comments and representations must be considered where there are no relevant or substantial objections. It may be disposed of summarily. Where there are objections, further information must be requested or a hearing must be held in prescribed manner before taking a decision on the matter. How is an operating license issued in practice? There is a difference in how the provinces operate with the process of issuing operating licenses. Santaco raised this matter during the public hearings into the land-based passenger transport sector by the Office of the Competitions Commission held on the 4th June 2018, as this was leading to confusion and conflict. Currently, Chairperson, Santaco has no say in decision by, for instance, a PRI, which is a provincial regulatory entity, how it deals with the issuing of operating licenses. And you can understand there could be serious problems around that. Part of the problem is also the fact that neither Santaco nor the associations are recognized in the NLTA. Double-edged sword, if I had to say. Government want the taxi industry to be organized, yet at the same time are not afforded the official opportunity to make submissions in matters that impact the industry, i.e. routes and operating licenses. In our mind, a clear example of such failure to consult was consequently played, or in the one, if I had to quote, the Africa Mall killings. Chairperson, you would understand even the Gauteng legislature did make its own findings around this issue of the Africa Mall. But we give that as an example. Operating licenses were issued on an existing route that was already in operation. The PRI invited operators to apply for the route but did not first consult with the taxi association that are already operational on those routes in the direct area. Santaco are of the opinion that if the associations were consulted, the violence would never have started on that particular route. Gauteng Provincial Department of Transport, in their presentation to the Competitions Commission on the 6th of June 2018, submitted that municipalities may request a PRI to impose moratorium where the market is saturated in relation to certain routes, but that is subject to the municipality having an acceptable integrated transport plan that clearly indicated why no operating license application should be allowed. And I must indicate, I've never seen a plan either from any municipality in the country, not a plan from any in particular legislators in the country on how they deal with the roots chairperson. They then also stated similarly, the lack of proactive planning in respect of new residential and commercial development has further resulted in turf battles over new lucrative routes. The opening of the Mall of Africa is a case in point. The ad hoc committee on taxi permits and operating licenses compiled and adopted a report during November 2016 regarding challenges surrounding the delays in the issuance of taxi permits and licenses, and advised that this was largely due to the system used to capture operating licenses on a national land transport information system being not fully functional, i.e. downtime and slowness. In the committee's mind, this was one of the contributors to taxi violence. Wars between association and taxi operators, illegal operations, illegal acquisition of permits and licenses. The NLTA states that an operating license must be issued within 6 months of submission of an application. In reality, the current waiting period that many bus taxi operators are faced with for the renewal and or issuing of a new operating license can be up to 5 years. Taking in consideration that I indicated that in actual fact you should be taking about 6 months, but I can prove that there are operators in this country, chairpersons, who are even waiting for the operating licenses for the last 15 years. Note, an operating license is only valid for 7 years. The majority of disputes within the taxi industry emanate from matters around operating licenses and allocations of routes. Bribery and corruption between owners and law enforcement agencies. Government officials who have vested interest in the taxi industry and collusion in favor of those interests. The Interprete made an interim recommendation in 1996 that no person should be granted a permit if they hold a position, is employed in a position that could result in a political conflict of interest. I think the Interprete goes further to say public servants, chairperson. That's why I brought the document for your own consumption, yourself and the committee's consumption. This matter is also dealt with in clause 13.1 and 13.2 of the NLTA, which state that specific persons must be impartial, have no direct financial or business interest in any sector of the public transport industry, making specific mention of persons involved in the management and execution of public transport related enforcements. Law enforcement policy is reactive rather than proactive, and there is a disconnect between the Department of Community Safety, law enforcement agencies, and the judiciary, as well as other official structures within provinces. There is limited coherent common strategy among law enforcement agencies on taxi violence. There is a lack of implementation of rules and regulations concerning law enforcement agencies under investigation for owning taxis. Not all roadblocks targeting the taxi industry are convened in accordance with the SAPS Act, Section 1, Sub B, Sub 8, Subsection 8. And this was cited from the ad hoc committee of inquiry on taxi permits and licensing reforms. When Uber entered the market, the meter taxi industry immediately asked why they were not subjected to the same legislation that they are subjected to. Currently, the NLTA does not deal with e-hailing services, and the National Land Transport Act Amendment Bill has been drafted to regulate e-hailing services. The NDOT sent out a practice note to the provinces advising them to deal with e-hailing operating license application as a charter service application. However, some provinces are issuing them with meter taxi operating licenses. Even in such cases, the e-hailing services vehicles and operators do not have to comply with the same stringent rules and regulation. Chairperson, I must just indicate here that if you look into South Africa and the entire 9 provinces, where you find the meter taxi for the first time in the history of the taxi industry getting into violence was in Gauteng, merely because the MEC of Gauteng have taken upon himself to decide to give Uber operators licenses. And if you look into the history of the operators, the normal taxi operators in Gauteng, including operators who are waiting for their operating license, you still ask yourself today, and I challenge this committee, and I challenge members of this committee, and I challenge the Minister of Police to go and test what I'm saying today. And you'll find that there are operators who've been waiting, and those operators who were granted operators license to operate Ubers, we don't know in which meeting and which act gave them permission to issue such operating licenses. We are presently contemplating taking the Department of Transport in Gauteng to court so that we can have proof of what has happened and what law did they use. On 16 May 2016, MEC Ismail Vadi launched the Uber operating license application process, which is not in the Act. Violence erupted thereafter between meter taxi operators and Uber e-hailing operators due to what was perceived as anti-competitive practices by Uber, as well as their encroachment on existing meter taxi routes. This led to the statement released by Gauteng Premier David Makhura in September 2017, wherein he advised that a special police task force was being coordinated with the National Police Department to look at the violence between two parties, which was Uber and meter taxi. There have over the years been various announcements by government ministers and officials regarding special task teams assigned to investigate incidents of violence within the taxi industry. However, it should be noted that Santaco have never been approached nor consulted with by any of these task teams, including the Special Police Task Force. Interaction and improved communication between the stakeholders involved in the taxi industry, i.e. the Special Police Task Force, the NDOT, the provincial departments of transport, law enforcement agencies, as well as Santaco. Want to, I quote, we want as Santaco to name and shame perpetrators of taxi violence in the Colenso killings. Colenso killings, that one of the 21 of July in Colenso in Natal. Why can't this person's identity made available? Santaco do not want any member or members of the taxi industry to take the law into their own hands, but is of the opinion that authorities need to show that they too are doing their part and not make it like there is anyone who is protected. And that's our belief as a taxi industry chairperson, that it seems as if there are very special people in this country who are protected when it comes to the violence that emanates within the taxi industry. Santaco would like to be placed in a position where it is able to be proactive in all matters involving the taxi industry rather than being reactive. As part of the strengthening of discipline within the taxi industry and its structures, Santaco wants to explore the possibility of Section 78 of the NLTA be broadened in order to include the possibility that a holder of an operating license, if found guilty of any criminal offense, that he or she also be subjected to the loss of his or her operating license in terms of this section. Chairperson, let me indicate this. This is very serious, and to the honorable members here, that you find a taxi operator who has involved himself in an act of violence where killings has taken place. And when this person is arrested, he only gets a sentence to go and serve sentence in jail. And his operation, which cost him, or which actually motivated him to do this course, his actions, nothing about his business. And we are saying as Santaco that if we were to bring a deterrent to whoever wants to commit violence within the taxi industry, it would be very important that we come up with a mechanism of saying that if you are arrested, found guilty and sentenced by a court of law, so we believe that immediately with that sentence which you have received, you must also lose your right to operate taxis. We have found that, and I must indicate that we have found that there are taxi people even today who are operating taxis while they are still in jail, and it is not good to society, and we will not be able to deal with the complete eradication of violence within this industry. We believe that if we were to be serious about eradicating violence in the taxi industry, that the taxi industry should be seriously assisted by government. Secondly, we believe that we should be supported by government institutions such as the South African Police Services, because we believe that the South African Police Services and other security institutions in this country are not supportive of the taxi industry, and they are not even interested in coming to find out from us what is happening, what could be done to assist. And we want to see a very serious collaboration between the taxi industry, government, and the other institutions of government. And we want to see the taxi industry not only alone cooperating, but we want to see the cooperation come from both sides, from government, the taxi industry, government institutions like your SAPS, like your law enforcement agencies, your traffic cops. We want to see that kind of cooperation coming forward. And I want to believe at this stage that if my colleagues have anything which they believe that I've left behind, they must feel free to fill me. But Chairperson, with your permission, when I want to end up on my side, I want to indicate that there has been a lot of seriousness from the taxi industry to run an organized business. But there has also been a lot of impediment from government institutions from making it impossible to happen. And we want to appeal, and I think I'm very happy the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee of Transport is here. I think we want to appeal to government to made use of the documents it has created. I'm going to hand over the founding document of Santaco to you, Chairperson, so that it gives you a meaning on why was Santaco established and why should government today suddenly disappear and leave Santaco on its own. We believe that we are left alone to struggle alone on our own issues, see how it comes, but what we don't have is the tools really to deal with. And what we are asking, Chairperson, we are asking that similarly to what is happening with the Medical Council in South Africa, what is happening with the Law Society in South Africa and all other institutions, we are saying as a taxi industry, we are requesting, we don't want government to give us its powers, but we are requesting government to look into possible limited regulatory powers so that we can be able to regulate this industry. For instance, if I had to give you, if an association suspends a member today for whatever reasons, that member tomorrow morning or this afternoon can belong to another association. Nothing prohibits him from joining another association, and he's just been suspended from another association. The same with the taxi driver. If the taxi driver, for instance, the taxi driver who once raped a woman somewhere in Mpumalanga, that driver is driving taxis. We don't have powers to stop him because the only institutions which can stop him is government. And from our industry, we even get incidents where people are continuing to harass, they harass children, they harass women. It is not in our making. And we would not want those kind of things to happen within this taxi industry. And we are appealing that if we are given those regulatory powers, and we believe that if we engage with the Minister of Police, the Minister of Transport, we would be able to debate those, what are those limited powers we are talking about, so that we can begin to regulate our industry in a peaceful and in a mannered way. We are a business organization. We should be making money. We should not be sitting here to come and give account why is violence happening within the taxi industry. And I think those are some of the requests that we are making, and maybe we may say that we may get an assistance from your committee to get this through to the Minister of Police, to get through to this to the Minister of Transport, and begin to sit around the table to plan the way forward. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tybos. We will now ask Kusatu, Mr. Matthew Parks, to maybe sit next to the Chair of Transport, the submission by Kusatu and Popkru. You're very much welcome, sir. You can continue.
Thanks, Chair. Can I hijack the good colleague from SAPS? I think you've permanently privatized him or nationalized him. It's not the first time. Thanks very much, Chair. I suspect the committee's under time pressure, so I'll try to be to the point. Thanks for giving COSATU a chance to raise the concerns of our members, both those who work as police officers or in the prisons, in the transport departments, but also as ordinary commuters, customers of our colleagues from Santaco. My name is Matthew Parks, I'm from COSATU. Chair, I think we want to welcome the initiative by Parliament, and I think we all agree, as the colleagues from Santaco said, this is an industry which is in crisis. Not recently, but for decades. I think, Chair, this is also not an ordinary industry. This is the backbone of our transport for the entire country, for the economy. Most workers depend upon taxis to get to work, to get to home, and so on. So it's not any other sector of the economy. We can't afford for it to be in chaos. Chair, I think we also need to acknowledge the history that this is one of the few black owner-led economic sectors which, despite apartheid, managed to grow, to thrive, and so on. Even till today, it's one of the few black-dominated industries. But I think we feel as COSATU, Chair, that despite all of government's many good policies, plans since '94, government has really failed the industry. to show leadership, to show investment, to also get the industry to abide by the rule of law as well. Chair, I think we also must acknowledge that your commuters, your workers, have no choice but to use taxis. There is no alternative public transport. Metro rail exists in a few cities. The cities where you're lucky to have metro rail, you see the collapse of PRASA today. Buses are far and few between. And I think, Chair, as COSATU, we want to be frank today. For us, this is a sector which is governed by anarchy, by lawlessness, and it's a danger to the commuters on a daily basis. Chair, I think the committee asked what taxi-related crimes, and hey, we came with a shopping list of taxi-related crimes. I think, as Santako's mentions many of them, the experience of our members going to work is that there's a complete disregard for all traffic laws. Taxi drivers are known to be Grand Prix drivers. They drive in the yellow lane. There's no such thing as a speed limit. Traffic light is nothing, it's irrelevant. You will see them when traffic officers stop them. They take the traffic ticket in front of the officer and throw it out the window. You may confiscate the taxi today. By this afternoon, it's back on the road. Of course, you'll see now and then in the Cape Times, they'll issue the most notorious traffic offenders, 80,000 rand worth of fines. No consequences, Chair. I think they say 10% of fatalities on the roads is taxi related. I think, Chair, it's complete anarchy in the industry. That the behavior of the drivers is really a threat to all traffic commuters. And of course, you must also mention the failure of departments around unroadworthy vehicles and the lack of licensing. Chair, as a union, we'd fail in our duty if we didn't mention that the industry seems to view itself as exempt from all labour laws. Whether it's the LRA, the BCEA, UAF, COIDA, occupational health, employment equity, it's one industry that has nothing to do with these labour laws. So you've got drivers who work 18 hours a day, 6-7 days a week, far and above the labour laws. There's no such thing as overtime pay for them. If you want to speak about the risk to drivers, they drive vehicles which A, are not roadworthy, don't even have seat belts. Of course, we recognize the profit motive, and drivers are under severe pressure to meet daily targets, and this exposes the passengers to risk every day. Chair, yourselves as members of Parliament passed a VAT hike this year, but we have an industry which doesn't pay taxes. They make about 16 billion rand a year. We would love to hear from SARS what's the figures of collection from the industry in terms of UAF, COIDA, income tax, company tax, VAT, because the rest of us are being squeezed by this thing, and these are not small profits, Chair. We don't know why SARS is so soft, yet they know the rest of us. Chair, I think we'd also need to mention, and look, we do appreciate the presentation by Santako. There's a lot of things we agree with and value. I think the presentation was quite honest and frank. It's quite helpful. But there's a very close relationship with many taxi owners, with criminals, with gangs and syndicates, especially in places like Cape Town. I think you've seen that in the taxi-related violence, 40% is in Gauteng, 38% is in KZN, Western Cape is closely following up. When we engage our members in Northern Cape, they've got nothing to report. So it's these three provinces. I think we all saw that what happened in KZN about a month ago, where I think it was 14 people were assassinated, thereabouts. And we know that thing's not a new thing. We saw the recent one-day strike by Carter and Codetta in Cape Town, and I think it was 4 Golden Arrow buses were burned down. And our bus drivers know that if they dare go into Kailicha when there's a taxi strike, they'll be lucky to come out with their shoes. Chair, we also know that many taxi owners are involved in money laundering from drug money. There's high level of weapons flying around. And of course, I think I was quite glad to hear Santako raise the issue of rape. That, young girls and women can't go alone in a taxi. There's frequent occurrences. I think, Chair, we must also appreciate what Santako was saying about the high levels of collusion between transport, traffic, and SAPS officials and owners, the issue of paying bribes for licenses, and so on. But I think we must also acknowledge our members of SAPS and the intelligence services who want to do the right thing and expose corruption and so on. and their lives are then put at risk, whether it's by their own colleagues leaking out their addresses to the taxi owners or vice versa. I think Chairman was also, as Satako was saying, mentioned that traffic officials or their wives or politicians own taxis, and there's a high level of collusion and corruption there. But Chair, look, I think in terms of the socio-economic context, we must acknowledge the taxi industry is important. We want to support it, we want to see it grow. It's the most widespread form of public transport in the country, reaching all areas, even new townships growing all the time. And we think that government has neglected to invest in it over the years. If you compare that to the massive subsidies in the billions of rands, hundreds of billions, pumped into rail, to SAA, to the buses, yet what we give the taxi industry, it's pocket change. That really has to change here, because this is the most important form of public transport. Chair, in terms of governance, look, we think your provincial departments, provincial governments are afraid to deal with the industry. National departments, we've been missing in action. We seem to lack the political will to deal with lawlessness. I think the proposals from Mrs. Tako were quite interesting. But really, Chair, we have no shortage of plans, but we've got no implementation of those plans. We have no investment in the industry by government. In terms of our proposals, Chair, I'm trying to be, because I know I'm fighting against lunchtime. We think there's a need to engage the industry by government and the public, that we have a common vision of how to turn the industry around. We need to look at how many permit holders do you allow per route to try to reduce the source of conflicts. Both the public and the private sectors need to invest in the sector. But at the same time, Chair, we need to sort out the collapse of PRASA, expand the bus network, because if you don't give commuters a choice, the industry becomes a monopoly and has no need to behave. Again, Chair, we need to see a political will by government to crack down and to enforce the law at all times. It can't simply be arrival life at Christmas and at Easter time. Chair, we think there's a need for a continuous joint SAPS, traffic, state security agency, transport and SARS task force approach to this process. We need to have an intelligence-led crackdown. We are pleased that the Minister of Police has deployed good leadership to intelligence. We see Generals Jacobs and Vera here. Those are the kind of leaders we want to see in the sector. Chair, we also think that in terms of the departments of transport and the municipalities, we need to remove those corrupt officials who are taking bribes from the industry. State security needs to do vetting of the officials involved in permitting and licensing, including lifestyle audits. You can't have municipal officials earning 200,000 rand but driving luxury cars. You know, it doesn't take rocket scientists. At the same time, Chair, I think as Honorable Groenewald said earlier, those whistleblowers in the public service need to be protected, because we can't have state security agency officials trying to expose corruption and their addresses are leaked to industry and they are threatened, the wives are threatened. And again, Chair, I think we need to deal with those officials or their wives who own taxis. We really want to see government dealing with gangs and syndicates who are running amok, especially in Cape Town. I think we want to see the Ministry of Police, SAPS, dealing with the hit squads, like they've been doing with the cash and transits, the impounding of unroadworthy, unlicensed vehicles. But Chair, also your manufacturers. There was I think as of 2010, the Western Cape Legislature did very good work around quantum buses being used as taxis, and they're not roadworthy. You have your passenger benches, the only thing holding them to the frame of the car is a screw. Now how is that screw going to withstand an accident? You know, we need to really have dealing with manufacturers there. I think, Chair, we'd also want to see continuous roadblocks on all areas. It's not difficult to go to roadblocks. Go to the taxi ranks. Let's start there and clean up, Chair. So in conclusion, Chair, we're hoping our proposal made some assistance to the committee. For us, the industry really is marked by lawlessness. Again, government has not assisted in resolving the many crises, but we see a fantastic potential in the industry. But we would also want them to come to the party and to obey all laws, including labour laws. And again, Chair, I think it's good the transport colleagues are here. We need to sort out the mess in PRASA, the buses and so on. But Chair, look, government also must stop being diplomatic, Chair. And we're glad to have a minister like Minister Tele there. We don't need to be polite about implementing the rule of law. We must be blunt and very harsh. We're too soft, too diplomatic. And daily our workers, our commuters are suffering. I'm sure, Chair, if ministers were to take taxis to work or the trains to work, we will see some political energy amongst them. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell, Chair. I'm hoping I've assisted the committee in the work. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parks, for your input. Honourable members, we're going to take now half an hour lunch break. There is lunch prepared. We're a lot of people, so if people can just be conservative when they help themselves. And those of us who won't get anything, let's use water. Half an hour, you're welcome.
these Guptas, we are seeing them making their shows in their country in India every day, even building their own temples in India and making us a laughing stock. Wait, what has happened to the extradition treaty that we have with the Interpol? We will wait for one Gupta man to die and chain them again. It's just an embarrassment, this thing.
Go.
Yeah, I think so. Because now we're wasting our